they as a company were kind of a wreck. There was a lot of politics happening, a lot of infighting
Yeah.
between the executive team. And so you talk about unrealistic expectations, and I
Yeah.
agree that that is one of the biggest root causes of failure. The
Yeah.
other one is lack of alignment internally.
Yeah.
And when you've got an executive team that not only is misaligned, but they are fighting each other, like they're getting personal, they're attacking each other, they're
Yeah.
protecting their turf, you just aren't going to succeed in a
Yeah.
large, complex transformation.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Technology is easy only for salespeople who have never implemented single software. Sales and marketing hype often cloud executives' judgment, leading to catastrophic decisions from the get-go. The biggest factor is unrealistic expectations. But that's not all. Issues such as politics and power struggle may throw off any model or estimates. The wisest thing any seasoned ERP veteran could recommend is to increase the estimates as much as possible. As one thing consistent with technology implementations is that there will be surprises. In today's episode, our guest, Eric Kimberling, discusses an expert witness story of an ERP implementation failure and the factors that led to it. He also shares why being realistic with expectations is the foundational step to succeed with large transformational initiatives. Finally, Sam and Eric debate how other similar transformation initiatives struggle and what executives need to know about succeeding with these initiatives. Let me introduce Eric to you. Eric Kimberling is the most recognized and respected independent ERP and ECM systems expert in the world, giving 100% unbiased advice to clients for over 25 years. Eric has dedicated himself to giving keynote speeches at industry conferences and universities worldwide, and has been quoted in thousands of articles in newspapers, magazines, and books, including the Wall Street Journal, CFO magazines, CIO magazine, and Fortune. He has served as an ERP and SAP expert witness in the industry's highest profile legal cases across the globe. He is also the author of the acclaimed book, Lessons from 1000 Digital Transformations. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Eric, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. And we are doing back to back. This is so much fun, right? We can always talk about ERP stories. We have so many.
So you put two experienced people together, or two or more experienced people together, you're going to have a lot of stories to share. So it's glad to be here. Glad to be here again.
Always fun, always fun. All right, so I know that pretty much everybody in the world probably knows, who Eric Kimberling is, but there are going to be some people on my show. I guess they might still not know you. So do you want to introduce yourself as well as, tell us what you're focusing on these days?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. And Third Stage is a lot like your company. It's an independent technology agnostic consulting firm that helps clients with ERP implementations as well as digital transformations in general, including, CRM and HCM, AI, whatever technology or technologies a company might want to deploy. We help clients select and implement that software. I've been in the ERP and technology space now for about 25 years. And in addition to running and being CEO of Third Stage, I also act as an expert witness in many cases. So I'll testify in courts and write reports and analysis for courts when there's a failure or a lawsuit that's being litigated.
Okay, amazing. So we are going to touch on some of those stories. I guess they are always fun in general. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest, because that's sort of the theme of the podcast. So that is going to be, Eric, your perspective on business growth.
Yeah, I think Well, first of all, I'd say if you're not growing, you're at risk of dying. So if you're not at least seeing some sort of incremental growth as an organization, it's almost like gravity will start to pull you back down. So my view of growth is if you can be aggressive with growth and grow as fast as you can, that's a lot healthier, and the challenges it presents are a lot better than the challenges of declining. Having said that, though, growth is very difficult, and it creates a lot of pressure on organizations. It creates a lot of chaos and turmoil at times. So it's not easy, but in my opinion, business growth is a great alternative to the alternative, which is not growing.
Yeah, great perspective. Great perspective. So yeah, so let's go back to some of those stories. I mean, we definitely want to talk about the expert witness stories. I don't know. I mean, maybe if you have any of those, share some background about what was the issue. I mean, there is going to be some sort of problem. That's why you are probably invited as the expert, right? So maybe pick on some of these stories. What was the issue? What were the challenges? And most of the time, at least, Eric, I don't know whether you experienced this or not, the majority of the clients that we work with, the customers, they're always underestimating the effort, okay? Underestimating the expertise required for something like this. And that's why they all get into trouble, regardless of whether it is going to be customer, vendors, whoever, right? Somebody is at fault. So share your experiences, I guess, based on whichever story you want to pick on.
Sure. Well, I like to pick on my first expert witness case because it was not only my first, so it was very memorable in that I had never been an expert witness before. In fact, I hate to admit this, I didn't even know what an expert witness was until the attorneys contacted me and said, "Hey, do you have expert witness experience?" And I said, "No, I don't even know what that is." So obviously I didn't start off on the right foot when we got that call. But for that reason, it was a very memorable case. And not only was it my first one, but it was actually still one of the biggest, most complex failures that I've been able to witness up close and personal. And even though I wasn't involved in the actual failure itself, when you are an expert witness, one of the things you get to do is you almost feel like you were there because you literally see every email that was exchanged throughout the project team. You see every status report, every PowerPoint presentation, every version of the code that was developed. I mean, you have access to basically everything that was done. And so your job as an expert witness is to reconstruct the train wreck, if you will, and tell the story of what happened and why it happened. So for that reason, for those reasons, it was a very memorable case for me. And it's also interesting too, because as I explain, sort of the lessons from this case, it's also interesting to find how, and you and I have talked about this too, it's interesting how as much as technology has changed in the enterprise tech space, the way organizations are implementing technology hasn't changed enough. They need to materially change the way they implement. And that was, I could tell this story in the context of 15 years ago when the case happened, or I could be telling the same story now, and you probably wouldn't be able to tell because it's the way it's been in the space for a long time. But this was a case, it was a large SAP implementation. It was across 30 different locations. The software vendor, SAP in this case, proposed that they could do an 18-month rollout in 30 months. Okay. And this is a company that didn't use any legacy SAP products. It wasn't an upgrade. It was a full implementation. And so back to your point that you just made, unrealistic expectations was problem number one. That just wasn't ever going to happen, the 18-month duration for 30 locations. And this is a complex industry. I'll give it away if I even say the industry because they have a dominant space in the industry. But I'll call it a consumer services company is probably the best way to describe it. It's a very unique consumer services company with field services and mobile workforces and things like that. So a lot of complexity in their business. And so unrealistic expectations was a problem. They invested very little in change management and training. They focused solely on a technical solution. And even that part they couldn't get right, but they invested all of their time and resources in developing technology. They didn't invest in training and even testing and things of that nature. They didn't invest very much in. So those are a couple of the biggest problems, but I'd say arguably the real biggest problem in this expert witness case was it failed because it wasn't managed well. The technology it was questionable whether or not the technology was the right fit. They didn't invest in the right activities. There was all these unrealistic expectations, things that we already talked about. But the perhaps even bigger thing is that they as a company were kind of a wreck. There was a lot of politics happening, a lot of infighting between the executive team. And so you talk about unrealistic expectations, and I agree that is one of the biggest root causes of failure. The other one is lack of alignment internally. And when you've got an executive team that not only is misaligned, but they are fighting each other, like they're getting personal, they're attacking each other, they're protecting their turf. you just aren't going to succeed in a large, complex transformation in that case. So those were at a high level some of the big findings and some of the reasons why that case was so memorable.
Yeah, so that is very interesting. So I'm going to peel some layers. I'm really good at that, I guess. I mean, that's how I'm known, on this podcast. So a couple of things to note. Number one, obviously, whenever anybody is looking for any software, they don't necessarily understand what is going to be the responsibility of the vendor in general. Okay, their expectations are going to be somewhere here, and then software vendor are probably going to be, I don't know on which. They are always all over the place, right? Typically, from the software vendor's perspective, and I don't know what was the outcome in this particular case, who was at fault, because obviously, companies like SAP, they have lawyers, internal lawyers. They know what they are doing. I mean, you are never going to find a fault. It's very, very, very rare. And I'll give you one more story, I guess. You are already connected with Brian Sommer, I believe, right, from Diginomica. So we have hosted him, and he has spoken about a lot of different stories. But in my personal experience, for the most part, it's very, 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 very rare that the software vendor is going to be at fault, especially contractually speaking. In some cases, there might be a case, but it's very rare. So I don't know if you share the same experience or not. And in this particular case, I don't know what was the outcome. So maybe talk about a little bit, what happened. And I know that there were problems from the customer perspective, but it is their responsibility to understand what to expect when you get into this. I mean, SAP is trying to sell a machine. Now, if you don't know how to use a machine, that's not their problem.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, someone else that, in addition to Brian Sommer, someone else that I follow, and I don't know if you do too in the industry, but Marcus Harris is an attorney that specializes in ERP litigation and contracts and things of that nature. But he used to work for multiple software vendors as the internal counsel, so he kind of knows how software vendors structure their contracts. And you're right, they are fairly airtight, and they are fairly clear in most cases that their job is to deliver a working product. Their job is not to deliver a business transformation to your organization. And those are two very different things. And what ends up happening is when I'm a client and I hire that software vendor, I hire them to deliver a technical solution, and that looks good to me on paper. But the reality is I want a business transformation, and those are two different things. So right away, we're off on the wrong foot here, because now I've got someone has to do all this other stuff beyond just building a technical solution. And if it hasn't been defined in the statement of work, if I don't have the internal competencies or resources to do it, if I don't know that I need to do it, that's on me, right? And so you're right, there's a lot of blame in these cases to go around. It's usually not just the client's fault or just the software vendor's fault. And there's so much gray too, even though contractually it may say that client is responsible for A, B, and C, then it becomes a question of, well, they did A, B, and C, but they didn't do it well. So does that mean they did it, or does that mean they didn't do it? And that's what the attorneys end up fighting over. This particular case, by the way, it's settled. So most cases don't ever get to trial. Although I haven't testified in trial probably 5 or 6 times in court. But of the other, I've probably been involved in about 50 cases, and maybe 5 or 6 of those went to trial and I testified. The rest of them settled at some point along the way. So I don't know. Actually, when you're an expert witness, the only thing I don't like about being an expert witness is you don't know when they settle. It's not like they reveal, this is what they got, or it's usually confidential. So all I know is the attorneys on our side that hired us were very happy with the outcome, but I don't know what that means. So
Interesting. So I think, that's what I have personally seen, that, the only thing you are going to get is the settlement, because obviously from these vendors' perspective, they don't want to see their name in the news as such, right? From their perspective, that is what they care for as such. They are not necessarily afraid of these things. So that's why they would end up settling. But as such, and one of the things that you mentioned related to technical solution, and that is another misalignment we have from the expectation perspective, that all of these companies, when they get into these engagements, they are always going to feel that, I'm getting some sort of technical solution. But technical solution is not enough. You need to do a lot more. And that is where the misunderstanding is, I guess. So even if you hired, let's say, the resellers or the SIs, for the most part, their responsibility is going to be, even if you do the technical build, that is not supposed to be printing your financial statements, I guess. But from customer perspective, their expectation is going to be that, hey, I'm buying this machine, I'm buying this technical solution, and magically somehow I'm going to get these financial statement printed, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's almost like the assumption is if you build the technology, people will use it and people will understand it, and that's not the case. And that's sort of like I don't know if it's the last mile, if that's the right word, but it's like you build the technology, that's a good foundation. But then the last mile of that build is going to be the actual adoption and use of that system, both from a process and an organizational perspective.
So define last mile a little bit. How do you see? Obviously, you have seen a lot, and articulating that is slightly more difficult, I guess. I mean, that's what everybody struggles with in my personal experience. So when you define, and maybe if you're going to have another story to define last mile, how would you define that?
Well, it's connecting the dots or building that bridge between the technical solution that's been built, even if it's a perfect technical solution and perfectly aligned with what your expectations are and your business processes, which it rarely is, but let's just assume it is.
Yeah.
It's perfect for your organization, perfect fit, been configured brilliantly. It's still going to fail if you don't connect the dots between that technical solution and the business processes and the people. And so it's sort of like a trifecta or a triangulation you have to complete.
Yeah.
And so many organizations, because you can see and touch and feel the software, but you can't see and touch and feel the business processes or the people. And so it's easier as humans, we just sort of gravitate to the technology because it's black and white. Either it works or it doesn't. But when it comes to introduce it to your organization, it's a lot more gray than that. And you've got to connect those dots and work through that gray to ensure that you're actually getting value out of the technology and that your business processes are actually aligned with the technology and vice versa.
So in your experience, and you have been doing this for 25 years, right? So what are the core challenges? Meaning, why does it not align? So let's say, for example, if and I typically try to act as the CFO. And Eric, let's say I have never done an ERP. Okay, this is the first time I am hearing 50,000 vendors, they are telling different story. And for me, it's very hard because I just don't know what I don't know. So let's say if I am exploring this for the first time, I just don't know who to believe. So in your experience, what are the core challenges?
Well, I mean, as it relates to business process anyway, a big part of it is, and I'll go back to this expert witness case study. The expert witness case study that I mentioned, the first one I was involved with, it was 30 different locations that were going to roll out that they were going to roll out SAP to those 30 locations.
Yeah.
The vision was that it would be a common operating model, common platform, common set of business processes.
Yeah.
That was the intent. But then by the time they got to the implementation, they said, okay, well, we're going to start off by doing a pilot location at one of the 30 locations.
Interesting.
So let's focus on the pilot. And what they did is they went to this one location and said, okay, let's build the entire solution around this one location without considering what the other 29 locations do or getting input from the other 29 locations.
Yeah.
So they built this pilot. They spent actually more than the original budget and more the original time just building the pilot. In that 18 months that I told you about, that it took them more than 18 months just to do the pilot, let alone
I believe you.
30 locations. So the problem was not only did the pilot struggle, but then when they started to roll it out to other parts of the organization, the other 29 locations, there was severe pushback and misalignment because they weren't involved. They had totally different ways of operating, and no one took that into account and said, well, let's define what we want to be when we grow up first, then we'll roll out technology to support that. So I think that's a really big, really common mistake that companies make is they assume that just because I'm deploying one single common ERP system, that is going to drive efficiency and drive process standardization in my business. But the software is not going to do it for you. It's just going to get rejected by the organization. So you have to have that clarity of definition of what your processes are first, and then the technology sort of layers on top of that.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting angle, and I'm probably going to have very similar story, especially around misalignment and understanding of how these things are supposed to work, I guess, right? So one is that, the adoption was the issue, meaning, let's say if you are going to feel that I have 30 different entities and their business processes, business model, business transactions are going to be fairly similar. That means if you are successful in one entity, then most likely you are going to be successful in the 30. So obviously there is the change management piece. There is the other angle, okay? So we have had some very interesting conversations with our clients, and they are like, hey, you know what? We are multi-entity, and this particular vendor is quoting effort for, let's say, one entity. Maybe they are going to say, you know what? It's going to take 18 months for one entity. In their heads, what they are thinking is, if for one entity, the effort is going to be 18 months, you should be able to copy paste all of these entities, right? So the marginal effort that you are going to have for these entities, maybe 25 months, 30 months. It should not be 18 times 30, right, Eric? So
Yeah.
in their case, they don't get it because the reason for that is sometimes these guys come from very IT centric background, okay? And when you are from IT centric background, when you are doing a custom product, okay, these things are far easier compared to an ERP product. It's far more difficult from the ERP perspective. Some products are really well built where you can literally replicate very easily. Some products are far harder. So I don't know. See, do you hear similar things? In this particular case, I don't know what was the challenge. So maybe you share your commentary now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, especially when you look at a really big, robust, complex ERP system like SAP, and they're all big and robust and complex, but SAP is, it's built for large,
Yeah.
complex companies. So it's by definition, it's going to be a larger, more complex solution.
Yeah.
And with that complexity comes a tendency for your system integrators and your outside consultants and your internal people. You have to break down this big, massive ERP system into bite-sized pieces. You focus on certain modules or certain processes within a module, and it creates the siloed approach, which defeats the whole purpose of an ERP system. So if you don't have that blueprint up front that says this is what our vision is for our business processes going forward, and when I say your vision for business processes and your blueprint, I don't mean every single screen we're going to use, every single field we're going to fill out. Not that level of detail, but at the very least, some sort of macro view of the processes that says this is our standard way of doing business, and this is what the software has to be able to support. If you don't have that, then what ends up happening is then each little silo within the implementation is just going to create processes and workflows based on what they know or what they think, without that consideration of the bigger picture. And that's why one of two things happens, or both, which is either you implement something that doesn't deliver the value or live up to expectations, or it's just completely, the processes are misaligned and broken when you implement it because no one painted that picture and that vision up front. And I would argue too, by the way, that, and I think this is maybe what you were alluding to, is if you spend that extra time up front, and let's just say we say, you know what, we're going to implement an ERP system, but we're not going to do it today. We're going to wait 90 days. In 90 days, we will start implementing. But in the meantime, we're going to spend 90 days. Those first 90 days have nothing to do with technology. We're just going to figure out what we want to be when we grow up, what we want our future state to be, what roles and responsibilities will be. Are we going to consolidate our accounting function? Are we going to consolidate HR into a shared services model? Make those decisions up front so that by the time you get to the implementation 90 days later or whatever it is, now you can go faster because now you have clarity, you have direction, you have decisions made that you're not wasting time while the meter is running. So it's ironic or maybe counterintuitive that by slowing down the project early on, you're actually going to speed it up exponentially more later on.
Yeah, and honestly speaking, that's a great argument. And from customer's perspective, let's say if I'm trying to act as a CFO again, from my perspective, whether I hire a system integrator or a VAR or a company like us, the meter is always running, right? Regardless of. So one of the arguments that we always get from the customers, hey, if you are going to do blueprint, I'm going to do this blueprint, okay, myself. Okay, how hard blueprint could be. And Eric, we both know this, right? When we get into an engagement, okay, they are going to say, hey, that's all done. The blueprint is done. And we know that how bad it is. So now let's say if you were to describe what are these gaps? Why do you need so much expertise to be able to create a blueprint that is going to be meaningful, I guess, for the technical teams? Because again, even for us, to be completely honest, when we inherit, and I don't know if you face this or not, when you get into these engagements, they are going to say, hey, we have done all of these workflows. The work is done. Okay, the only thing you need to do is analyze and figure out, what. And we are like, okay, it is done. Boom, gone. It's not very meaningful because I don't know, what those charts and graphs mean, to be completely honest, because the terms are not aligned, the processes are not aligned. It is something else. Your data is all over the place. So I don't know how to use this. Maybe we can learn something from it, but for the most part, we need to redo the work. I don't know if you face this or not in your experience.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. And I think what you're alluding to or touching upon is this dynamic where, yes, a software vendor or a system integrator they can create a blueprint. They will create a blueprint for you, but their definition of blueprint is basically the answers they need to configure the software. And so they're down at this really tactical workflow level, and they're doing that usually in isolation from the bigger picture end-to-end business processes and that future state vision that we talked about. So yes, they do they do a technical blueprint, but they're not doing an overall integrated end-to-end business blueprint. And they're not looking at the process and the people side of the blueprint. And those are, in my opinion, even more important than the technology piece.
Yeah.
So when a vendor says, or a system integrator says, oh, no, we'll do the blueprint. Yeah, they will, but they're going to do it to get to their end solution, which is to deliver a working technology product, not to deliver business transformation. So if you truly just want a working technical solution that doesn't have any bugs and can, flow through the entire system, then yes, they can do it. But if you want it to integrate with your business processes and your organization, then you need to do a broader business, true business blueprint rather than just a technology blueprint. And I think that's the nuance, or that subtle difference that's really important for most people. If you don't have experience, you're not going to know any better that that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to clarify, some more there in terms of my position. So there are three ways that companies generally approach this, right? Number one is going to be, hey, you technical guys, you are going to create the blueprint, and that is what you alluded to, that is probably going to be technical print. Number two case could be that, hey, I have hired these smart people, CIOs or whoever. My company is going to create the blueprint. So in this particular case, you are utilizing your internal resources to be able to create blueprint rather than working with a company like Third Stage or Elevate IQ to create the blueprint. So these are three different things, and they have their own pros and cons. And typically customers are going to feel, what, this is my business. I already understand my business. So I am probably going to be better off in creating the blueprint. So why do I need to hire the consulting company to do that? Because I need to hand over the knowledge first, and then they are going to create the blueprint. So obviously, there's going to be a little bit of work involved in that. So in these three approaches, let's say if you were to compare and contrast all of those three, so why do you need to have the expertise that is really required, especially from companies like us, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a common question we get from our clients as well. But I would say that you need all three. It isn't necessarily a question of which one is the best.
Yeah.
You want all three, because if you think about it, it's sort of another triangulation. You've got client that knows their business really well, for better or for worse. Even though they want to improve it, they know how things are today. They might have a decent understanding of what things should be in the future. And then you've got the software vendor who knows how the technology works. And then you need someone to bridge that gap, though, because otherwise that's where things get misaligned. Is you've got technology vendor that has their standard way of doing things. You've got client's business that has their way of doing things. And now you've got to figure out how do you bring that together. And that's where companies like yours and mine, Elevate IQ and Third Stage, can help. In that we're objective, we're agnostic, we're not trying to force software in, we're not trying to sell software because we don't. So we can help facilitate with the client. Let's help you define that blueprint. We're not going to provide the answers for you because you know your business, but we can facilitate the framework and help prioritize where to focus efforts, so that by the time the technology vendor gets involved, they can add another layer to that blueprint, which is more the technical workflow layer. Yeah. But you really have to have all three. If you're missing any one of those, I'd say even if it's any of those three, clients, company like one of ours, and or technology vendor, you can't do it without all three. In my opinion, you can't do it well without all three parties.
So that's a very interesting comment as well. So now if you look at the positioning of any of the ERP vendors in the market, we typically, Eric, we know this, right? Typically, we always recommend that you have to have the product expertise on the table. We ourselves are not going to be enough for any engagement. If somebody is telling that, then they are probably not independent. It's very clear, right? But if you talk to any of the ERP vendors, they are always going to argue that the companies like us are not going to add much value. So now going back to the commentary again from your perspective, let's say why do they say this, that companies like us don't add any value, when we are saying that we need to have them because without them we cannot really be successful, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd say some of the more forward thinking and innovative software vendors and system integrators are open to working with companies like yours and mine.
Yeah.
They're not all against it, but I'd say the bigger they are, and the more that's at stake for them. When I say they, I mean the software vendor and or system integrator. When they have a big payout that's at stake, and especially if it's a multi-million-dollar account for one of these vendors, they don't necessarily want the accountability and transparency that a company like yours and mine brings to the table. Because our job is to represent the client, right? Our job is not to sell software. Our job is not to bring in an army of 50 technical resources to get billable right away. Our job is to bring in a small SWAT team that can advise and be really an extension of the client's team, and our only loyalty and only vested interest is in the client. It's not that we don't care about the vendor, but we're not there to help them sell more software and help them, maximize their implementation services, and that's what they want. So it's conflicting self-interest, to be honest. I mean, there's conflicting self-interest between client and software vendor. And if we come in, you or I come in as a representation of the client, that's just, sort of tilting the playing field to the client's advantage and not necessarily the vendor. So that's what I think is I think that's the unhealthy dynamic that you see a lot of times in the industry. But at the same time, you and I have to coexist with these software vendors, right? We can't, we have to be nice, right? We can't be casting stones at them and overly criticizing them, but we can hold them accountable and represent the client's best interest.
Okay, amazing. So let's go back to the expert witness story, right? So in that, let's say, Eric, if you could go back in time, okay, and if you were to redo the implementation or selection or whatever they were doing, how would you change that? How would you approach, given that the political factors, the egos, the personalities, the people, nobody's going to change that. That's not changing in the next 100 years. Whatever you can really change is probably the approach that you are going to. So let's say if you were to go back in time and you had some way of taking an ideal approach for this particular part, how would you do that?
Well, I mean, it's easier said than done, but the first and foremost, is I would have said you have bigger problems than your digital transformation. I mean, they did have, there was turnover on the executive team, and it just wasn't a stable leadership team. So my recommendation would have actually been to not do the project at that time. I would have said delay it, figure out, get your business in order first, then go through the implementation. But that's easier said than done, right? There's also a school of thought that says, okay, even though leadership is a mess, they're not on the same page. We still have to change, right? We still have to evolve as a company. So let's just assume then we can't change that we are going to move forward with the project. At the very least, I would have looked at the 18 months and it was a $36 million budget. I can't remember if I mentioned it. It was 18 months and $36 million budget that was proposed. And I would have said, okay, that is not at all realistic for any company that size, especially a company that's going through the turmoil that you're going through. So we need to add a huge buffer to that. So I would have said, let's make this a 3 to 4 year implementation at the very least for this company, because they had so many things they had to work through. And you have to look at the politics of your organization and the risk tolerance of your organization and just the culture of your organization and understand how that's going to affect your implementation timeline and cost. And so that's probably the first thing I would have done. If there's one thing I could have done, it would have been that. It would have been to just right size the implementation plan and budget to reflect the reality of what that company was and what they were going through at that time. And by doing that, by having realistic expectations, now all of a sudden you've given yourself a chance to succeed. To your point earlier, when you start off with unrealistic expectations, you don't have a chance to succeed. You've already started off with a 0% probability of succeeding, because it's not reality. But you're basing all your decisions on something that's not reality.
Yeah, so very interesting. So when you look at this issue of unrealistic expectations, I guess, right? So one of the things that we notice in our client base, and I don't know if your experience is going to be or not, typically clients, they have their own sort of biases. And sometimes because of that, they just do not listen to any consulting firms, I guess. And even if the consulting firms, let's say if you have 5 vendors, okay, they all have their quotes. Obviously, somebody is probably going to provide the cheaper quote. They are probably going to have the shortest timeline. And you are so biased in your head that you are going to believe that this is probably real, which is not real. And that you already countered that, you probably need to be realistic. I'm not saying that you need to go for the lengthiest quote or whatever, but you need to understand what is happening here. What is the reality, rather than buying this dream that you can probably deliver this in whatever 18 months, right? So in your experience, do you see similar scenarios in your client base as well?
Yeah, exactly. You want to be realistic about everything. You scope and what modules you need, and whether you should be in the cloud now or use one of the legacy solutions in the interim until you're ready to move to the cloud. All that kind of stuff. You've got to make sure you're in sync with as a team.
Okay, amazing. So we are close to our time now, Eric. I don't know if you're going to have any sort of closing advice for our listeners.
Yeah, I would just say that for as much as technology's changed in the last 25 years of doing this, it's amazing to me how the way companies try to implement technologies, how they haven't changed. And I think it's time, for the industry to recognize that. And I think that's what's great about what Elevate IQ and Third Stage, our two companies. I think it's great that we're here. I think we have a very important role to fill in helping clients sort of move that needle towards being successful. And on a more optimistic side, I'd say it's not, these projects are always going to be difficult, but it's not rocket science trying to figure out what you need to do to be successful. it doesn't need to be as complicated as organizations make it oftentimes. And the things that, you and I are talking about here today, the things that this company did wrong in this case study versus the things that you need to do to do it right. Doing it right is actually a lot cheaper and easier, and it's not hard. It's harder to do it the hard way. I mean, you just create a lot of turmoil you don't need to.
Yeah.
And so if you just sort of, get that objective advice and get that independent, agnostic view of how things should be for you, that's what you need. You need someone that can speak reality, speak the truth to you, not necessarily just try to sell you software. So that'd be my closing thought there.
Yeah, amazing advice. I could not agree more. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be really diligent about whatever you are getting into. Know what you are getting into, because that's what is probably going to make you successful. On that note, Eric, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. It's been great to be here, and look forward to the next one.
Of course, Eric, anytime. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you'd like to learn about Eric, head over to thirdstage-consulting.com. It's thirdStage-consulting.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.